In the Adding Curtain Walls movie, we saw that we can use a curtain wall type that has a predefined spacing in both the horizontal and vertical directions. This will certainly serve your needs in many situations, but there's many situations where you need a curtain wall that has to match a certain design intent. Maybe it doesn't have a regular spacing, maybe you need to customize it in some way. So in those cases, you're going to want to just lay out the curtain grid yourself. And in this movie, that's exactly what we're going to do. This file is called Curtain Wall Grids and Mullions, and it represents where we left off in the Adding Curtain Walls movie. We have a simple curtain wall here using just the out-of-the-box curtain wall style, which is essentially just a big pane of glass, like a blank canvas. And I could certainly work here in plan view, but it's going to be a lot easier if I go to an elevation view, such as the south elevation in this case, so that I can look right at the curtain wall that I'm designing and get a better sense. So I'm going to zoom in on that area. And as you can see, we have this big blank slate to work with. On the Home tab, we have a curtain grid tool. And as you move your mouse around the edges of the curtain wall, you'll see that you can draw these grids either horizontally or vertically. And what I want to do is just sort of get them in rough locations for right now. We've seen this kind of approach before in Revit. And then, of course, like other places in Revit, we can go in and modify the temporary dimensions to fine-tune position of these things later. Now, we could certainly do that by selecting each one and using the temporaries, but sometimes it's actually handy to see the dimensions before you edit so that you have a better idea of which ones need editing. So I'm actually going to make a permanent dimension. On the Annotate tab, I'm going to click the Align tool and then just select each of my edges. And I'll just place the dimension up here to kind of get it out of the way, but keep it still visible. So now when I select the grid, the remainder of the dimensions will stay visible, but the two on either side of the grid I have selected will become editable temporary dimensions. And so I can just click and make whatever modifications I want. And I pretty much want each of these bays to be 3 feet. That one there. And the ones at the end to be 1'6". So that kind of takes care of that. And then let's double check in the other direction. We've got 2 feet here. That's good. 6 feet there. And we're ultimately going to put a doorway in here. So that'll give us a total of an 8-foot tall door. So that's the basic layout of our grid. What we want to do next is take a look at how we could start adding mullions to that grid. When I click the Mullion tool on the Home tab, you can see that there's 3 placement options. We can add mullions to an entire grid line. We can add mullions to individual segments. And we can even add mullions to the entire grid of all empty segments. But I'm not going to do that yet because I still have some more work to do with the grid itself. So for now, I'm just going to add mullions along the outer grid lines, like so. And maybe these 2 over here, and these 2 right here. So we'll start with those. And then I want to do some work in this area because, as I mentioned, I want to put a door in here. You can't make an irregular shaped grid directly. The way you do that is you actually create the overall grid lines and then you select them. And on the ribbon, you have this Add and Remove Grid Segments button. So when I click on that, it will allow me to remove segments of the grid line that I don't want to see. So I'll do that again. I'll select this grid line, add and remove segments, and remove this grid line segment right here. So what that leaves me with, if I use my tab key, is one big panel right there in the middle of the grid. So that's a pretty handy approach to customizing the grid and getting exactly the effect you're looking for. Now you can do other things with these panels. I'm going to go ahead and tab in and select one of these panels. Now it turns out if you right click, you have other selection options for the panels. So we can select them each individually with the tab key, but that gets a little tedious. You can also do tricks like this where you can say select them all on the horizontal or vertical grid. And you see how those highlighted all the way across? So what I'm going to do is take those 4 panels that I have selected, and they're currently using the system panel called Glazed, and I'm going to change those to solid. Now that actually captured my doorway as well. I'm going to select my doorway, and let's see what we have available for that. Turns out if we scroll up a little bit, we actually have a storefront double door panel type that we can load in there, and that will actually make that a door. Now it's a little tough to see what we did here down at the bottom, and the door is easy enough to see, but let's go ahead and change the shading mode down here on the view control bar, and I'm going to choose the shaded with edges option. Now, I know the blue is a little bright here, but the blue represents glass, and you can see that the gray panels, those are actually spandrel panels, and so those are solid panels. You can see also that I've missed one grid line here with mullions, so let's go ahead and take care of that. Just like so. One last little touch-up that we can do. You can actually control whether or not the vertical mullions or the horizontal mullions interrupt one another. And you can do that by selecting on them, and they have these little controls that appear right here. Now, it might be a little easier to see if I set that back to hidden line. Well, about the same. But I'm going to click on those little things, and you'll see that that now makes the horizontal predominant. I'll do it again over here, like so. Can maybe do it here as well. Here as well. Missing one grid line right there. And again, I want that one to be interrupted there and there. As a finishing touch, let's go take a look at our 3D. Let's spin this guy around. Get a better look. Zoom in. And we definitely want to look at this one with shaded and edges. And so there you have it. So by adding some grids and then applying mullions to those grids and then swapping out different kinds of panels, you can make a more interesting customized curtain wall design than you could get if you just rely on the equally spaced type controls.